Thursday, Sam Kahn with us, 365 Sports from theathletic.com. Sam, thanks for your time. Earlier in the show, we did the list of over-under wins in the Big 12, and K-State and, of course, Utah at the top. Paul did his rankings that he sent in today to the Big 12. I'll do mine tomorrow, etc. Was it easier this year, even though more teams, to fill that thing out top to bottom for you?
Harder, honestly, to me, because ranking them when slotting them 1 to 16 is really difficult. The way I look at it, and to make it easier for myself, is do it in tiers. And so I say Utah, Kansas State, and Oklahoma State are my top tier. And then that next tier is Kansas, Iowa State, Arizona, and so on and so forth. So I think if you think of it in that way and you group teams together that you think are likely to finish in a particular place, then it makes it a little easier to digest. But in some ways, with the old 10-team league, or I guess, last year was 14, but in the old 10-team league, you knew everybody was going to play everybody. And this becomes even more complicated because now you know everybody's not playing everybody. So it makes it a real challenge, but at the same time, I think what we do, and I know you guys do the same, is you look at the rosters, you look at the situation, the coaching stability and all that, and you try to figure out just who the best teams are and go from there.
Sam, this was like when I did it today, it took me about 6 to 7, maybe like 6.5 drafts, to be fair. And I think that from my 4th team to my 9th team is a razor-thin margin like I wouldn't even have thought of before.
Yeah, I would agree, because I think when I think of the conference title contenders, I think Utah, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Kansas. And then you have that group of Iowa State, Arizona, West Virginia, Texas Tech, UCF, TCU. And, buddy, those teams could all finish a number of ways. And I dare I say I might even throw Colorado in there, because I do like what they did in the portal this offseason, and I do think they're going to be better. So you really have about 7 teams, I think, maybe 8, that in that middle group that could be anywhere from what you would consider dark horse title contenders to teams that maybe are fighting for a bowl game at the end of the year.
Sam, Oklahoma State's mentioned in that top tier. So I'm trying to decide, like, I guess they're not totally disrespected, but it still feels like we still kind of sell Oklahoma State short. And yet they've maybe been the most consistent of any Big 12 team since the Big 12 started, not named Oklahoma or Texas. So why do you think that is? Do they just kind of get lost behind the Sooners for forever? Is it because they've never gotten like over that ultimate hump? Or is it just because the picture of consistency is kind of boring?
I think it's a combination of things. One, I think it's easy to forget them because, like you said, they've been in Oklahoma's shadow for a while. And they haven't, even though they have been a picture of consistency, they haven't been a team that has consistently won the Big 12. That they played for it and they've been in the mix, but they haven't won it consistently. And so I think that's one reason why they kind of fly under the radar. The other is sometimes I think they are just the picture of expect the unexpected. Sometimes I feel like when we expect them to be really good, they're not.
Right.
And then when we expect them to not be very good, then all of a sudden they're really good. And sometimes that even happens in the course of one season. Take last year as an example. I thought they were going to be a probably 6 or 7 win team, maybe, fighting to get a bowl game. And I felt very vindicated in that 2 or 3 weeks into the season after what we saw on the field. And then they turn around and end up playing in the Big 12 championship game. I think in this new version of the league, they are going to be a team that plays in that Big 12 conference championship game a lot more frequently than they have in the past. And I do think this year, with all the starters back that they have and the production and, again, some of the stability on the staff, yeah, I think they're a team that you have to think of as a factor and force now, and one that as long as Mike Gundy is there and doing what he does, I think they're a team you have to consider in that group long term.
Is there anybody that is not a part of those first 2 tiers that you feel like can crack that? Or will they need some breaks, or possibly a team or two above them has something go wrong with injuries?
The team that I look at, and gosh, I hate to do this because I felt like we got burned by it last year, but the team that kind of not in the top two tiers that I think that could make a jump is Texas Tech. And I think a lot of it's going to come down to just quarterback. Because I wonder if they don't have the injury issues at quarterback the last 2 years, and particularly last year, do they win a couple more? Do they squeak out another game or two that they ended up losing because they had to, Baron Morton was banged up and Chuck was banged up, and they had to go to Jake Strong, their freshman at one point. I look at all that they bring back on offense with, if Morton's healthy, Taj Brooks, they, obviously we talked about Micah Hudson, a receiver who Joey McGuire thinks is going to be a day one contributor. And then again, you talk about stability on that staff. They only lost one full-time assistant on that staff. And you like the way they've recruited the last couple of years. They've brought in a recruiting class that ranks in the top 2 or top 3 of the conference each of the last 2 years. And so you should start to see some of the fruits of that labor. You should start to see those players start to blossom. That the first Joey McGuire recruiting class, you should start to see some of those guys really contribute. Even some of the guys from last year's class, maybe you start seeing some of those guys really make an impact. Thought they did a solid job in the portal. That's a team that probably can make a jump. The other one I would be curious about, and I'm watching really closely, is TCU, because we saw what their ceiling was in 2022. Of course, we saw what their floor was last year. Can they get back? And if they bounce back, can they get to a level, not necessarily a team that wins the title, but are they a team that's going to be in the mix that could find themselves playing for a berth to the title game in November?
Texas Tech does a great job of, the brand, like the stadium updates and things like that. But it also feels like they've maybe, I don't know, Sam, like maybe not hyped as much because of kind of how last year went. And as a result, I think maybe less people think about them, and almost in a beneficial way, they're kind of like lying in wait almost in a good way. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I totally think there's some buyer's remorse last year, because I think we all scooped up Joey McGuire's confidence. He's got a ton of charisma, but he was not shy about expectations, and that was probably too soon for that. I don't think they were ready, but we all like to look for who's the trendy next pick to come out of nowhere, and we were probably a year too soon on that. And again, you look at the way they finished the year, you wonder if they're healthier, then does that make a difference? Now, that health doesn't make a difference when they're opener. They opened against Wyoming and lost on the road. They shouldn't have. That was a game that I saw a lot of mistakes and self-inflicted wounds that if they erase those, maybe they win that game and maybe things are different. But that's going to be really honestly the onus on this team is, can they avoid things like that, the penalties that kill drive or extend opponent's drive? Don't beat yourself. If they don't do that, yeah, this is a team that could be in that mix. But yeah, I agree with you that there's going to be some caution on them because so many of us went in on them last year and then they didn't really live up to it.
Because when I was filling out 1 through 16, and then I realized I have Texas Tech, I don't know, mine's going to be released tomorrow, somewhere like 8 or 9. I'm like, man, for the expectations and what they've been able to do in the 2 or 3 years there, they always have closed well. And then last year, of course, got smoked by UT, but still played well in the bowl game. That's weird now with these conferences, Sam, of 16 and 18 teams, and a team might be pretty good and they're like 9th in a preseason or might finish 9th. That's nuts.
Yeah, it's what makes this so awkward with these huge super conferences and all these weird fits and the different schedules and everything. West Virginia is a team, Justin Williams my colleague did a Big 12 early power ranking last month and had West Virginia 8. West Virginia went 9-4 last year, and they bring back their starting quarterback, and they bring back a decent amount of talent. That it's wild to think that there are teams that are, like you said, legitimately good that could finish basically in the middle of the conference or even maybe in the back half of the conference. I'd be curious to see how many teams in this league go to a bowl game. That's going to be fascinating to watch. But I do think that the consensus is there's that top tier, like we said earlier, the top: Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Utah. And I think if you want to argue Kansas, I won't doubt you on that. I think a lot of that again depends on Jalen Daniels' health, the quarterback health. But yeah, there's a lot of those teams that any of these teams that we're talking about, especially in the second tier, could win 9 games or could win 5 games. I guess it wouldn't shock me for many of them if they went either way.
Sam, picking the all-conference team is always a hard thing to do, particularly along the offensive lines and things like that, because, one, they make you just pick offensive linemen and not a center and 2 guards and 2 tackles, which I hate. And you had to find a fullback on this list. Again, only one team lists one on their actual depth chart if they release depth charts anymore. That's another problem. But with the transfer portal, this has become really difficult, especially guys coming in. I personally, I put LeJontay Wester as one of my wide receivers because he's going to catch 100 passes. He's a machine at that. But it's really hard to, determine these things, especially with all these new players coming in.
Yeah, that's the other thing. And I think the old way we used to do it was when you looked at a preseason team, you looked at, okay, who do they bring back? Who has the most production and who seems to be ready to take that next step? Well, gosh, you can't really do that anymore because there aren't that many guys that are returning from a lot of these teams. There's the Oklahoma States are the outliers that have so many guys coming back, and because there's so much roster turnover. So it really does make it difficult. But again, I think that just puts the onus on us to evaluate, okay, what did this person bring to his previous team? What's his talent level? And it's more in some ways, I think it's more projecting the talent level. Like I saw somebody put out an all SEC preseason team the other day or whatever and had Isaiah Bond on it for Texas, which Isaiah Bond has not played a snap at University of Texas, but clearly if you watched him play at Alabama, he's superbly talented and in that offense he's going to fit really well. And so he should, in theory, be an impact player. But and it makes it even harder now too. Like you said, guys aren't really in depth charts as much. When's the last time I saw a spring prospectus from a program? We don't see many of those from programs anymore because guess what? If you put that out in March, half the roster may be gone when spring ball's over. So, you don't have as much access to practice. So it really does make it a challenge. And I'll tell you, the ones who I feel bad for are the ones who publish these preseason magazines where their print deadlines are in May and June. And there's still roster moves being made after those things go to print. So it really is a crapshoot to a certain degree.
And spring games are evolving where they're not even necessarily what they used to be, and that information that you get from that may not even matter because those guys might transfer out right afterwards, or you might not even hold an event or whatever the case may be. Sam, I know this is not it's something you can answer for sure or not, but we were talking about it earlier, everybody's putting out their playoff predictions. Everybody's putting out this and that in the summertime. And a lot of these projections for the college football playoff is just interesting to see, the balance of the conferences or maybe the lack thereof. How difficult do you anticipate, or how much difficulty did maybe you gather from people in the Big 12 of, more often than not, every year they're going to have one team, but how difficult do you think it will be in most years to get more than one team for a league like the Big 12 with the way things are currently set up?
It's going to be fascinating because I think we're going to have to change how we think about what a playoff team is, because we thought in the 14 playoff era, a playoff team is an undefeated team or a one-loss team. I don't believe we ever had a 2-loss team get in there. We're going to have 2-loss teams now that are in these spots. And in some cases, probably if you're SEC or Big 10, 3-loss teams. That's going to change the whole dynamic. And what is going to be the most fascinating to see for me is how does the committee value, let's say, a 3-loss Ole Miss versus a 2-loss Kansas State, if neither of them won their conference championship. That's going to be the question. And I do think how many of these Big 12 teams are going to be able to go through? That's the other thing. How many Big 12 teams are going to be able to go through with only a couple losses? Because I would stand to reason that if you're a 3-loss Big 12 team, you're probably not getting in unless you win the conference spot. So you're going to basically have to be a 10-2 team or 11-2 team to get in. How many of those is the Big 12 going to have at the end? Are they going to have enough to get 2 teams in? If they do, then I do think the Big 12 will have a decent shot at getting them in. But there, as we all know, this is a subjective process by 13 individuals looking at things. They're looking at things objectively, but the opinion at the end of the day is subjective on what they determine and value the most on eye test versus strength of schedule. We're going to have the same conversations that we had in the 14 playoff for the 12 team. It's just we're eliminating 6 of those spots because 6 of those spots should be guaranteed by winning your conference, which is a beautiful thing. But those at-large spots are going to be very much subject to the same arguments that we had in the past. And the Big 12, I would love to see them get multiple teams in every year, but I think when they're going to push them up against a loaded SEC schedule, yeah, I think that not that I love it this way, but I think the committee oftentimes is probably going to give the nod to the SEC teams if we need no other reason to look for it than Alabama getting in over an undefeated Florida State.
Yep.
I mean, I feel like you'll almost reverse engineer your reasoning to get the result that you ultimately think because this is who you think the team is deserving regardless of whether they are.
Do you think at some point in the first 2 or 3 years of this, and again, we got to let this thing play out, but how good would it be for the morale of everybody else but the SEC and the Big Ten if they have one of those like an FSU Alabama situation and they pick somebody else, not the SEC team, that might be their 4th or 5th team?
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice. It would be nice to see some other conference get the benefit of the doubt. It would be nice to see some other team or program that usually doesn't get it. But that is, again, the one beauty of this playoff is that, A, you're going to be able to earn your way in and not be denied if you win your conference, which is a huge plus, especially with a spot. But also, I will feel less bad about a team getting left out from an at-large perspective if you're talking those 6 at-larges versus, spot number 5 or 6 in the 14, because getting left out of the 4 was really hard because there were years where there were probably more than 4 teams that were deserving. There are some years there are probably less than 4 teams deserving. But in this case, it's not to say that the belly aching will go away, but I feel less bad about team number 13 getting left out as opposed to team number 5 or 6.
Sam, thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. We'll see you in Vegas. Is that right?
No, Justin Williams will be there in Vegas. I will be in Dallas for SEC Media Day.
Really? He got in, Sam. Craig and I have a theory that it's because we, especially, look, you mentioned the Florida State thing. After that happened, I was not all that kind to Premier Sankey. So, I think maybe we've been blacklisted.
You guys, because of your comments about the SEC and Sankey, got us rejected.
Yeah.
I did reach out to somebody. In fact, John Bianco, UT, who's being honored as a Hall of Famer now with his in the business he is in media relations. I said, hey, we've been pretty good to you. I've known John for 30-plus years. I don't know if he's going to go to bat for us or not, but oh, well. Oh, well. Hey, Sam, enjoy Dallas. Hopefully we talk to you again before then, and also maybe that week. Have a great day.
Thanks so much. I'll take care.
Thank you. You too. That's Sam Kahn. Great dude. TheAthletic.com.